Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us today. Our topic is stress. Why stress is so bad for our health, how we can know whether we're suffering from chronic stress, and most importantly, how we can reduce the effects of stress in our lives. My guest is Dr. Elissa Epel. She is a health psychologist and a stress researcher, as well as the author of the book, The Stress Prescription: 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. Dr. Epel, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's an honor to be here.
So it's fascinating that you have done such important research on the effects of stress on our health. Let's start there, the why. Why do we need to reduce stress in our lives? What type of an effect does it have on our health?
We're all under too much stress. Whether we notice it or not, stress levels have gone up over the last 20 decades. And of course, especially now after the pandemic and all of the global stressors and existential threats we're under. So we are coping with a lot, and our brain is not really geared to be worrying about such big things that are in the future. We really want to just worry about what's in front of us, any immediate survival threats. So what happens is that we have a lot of stored up unconscious stress all the time from being bombarded by information from screens and multitasking. And so that kind of taxes our memory and makes us more reactive. And we just are more stressed than we need to be. So my purpose in writing this book is to just really help people step back, take a look at their life, and find stress in their day, find ways that they're unnecessarily rushing or doing things that pack their schedule too much and just make them walk around all day without a break, without spaciousness, without time to really connect and be well and really have downtime. So I think when we have downtime, when we think we're relaxed, we're not really fully relaxed. And just test that right now, Lori. How are you feeling in your body? And everyone who's listening, are your hands relaxed, your jaw, your eyebrows? Notice if you're holding tension in your body. So often we are, and we don't need to be. We can actually breathe into that and relax and remind ourselves that right now things are okay.
That's a great point that you sort of bring to our awareness. Is a lot of people probably are chronically stressed and may not even realize it because, hey, that's normal to them. So can you dig a little bit deeper there about how do we know when we're stressed, if we really need to work on reducing our stress?
Many of us know. And when I talk to people and tell them I study stress, most people say, well, you should study me because I'm always stressed. And we think it's a personal problem. It's a universal problem. And there are different levels of stress. So I think one way to really leave ourselves in a chronic state of stress is to not give ourselves enough time and to use time as a commodity when we just schedule too much. That's a kind of a daily stress habit or lifestyle. And I'm guilty of that for years and years, lived that way. And that just, really wears out our battery pretty quickly. And of course, there are the random events, the traumas, the slings and arrows that come at us. And those are naturally, we want to have a mount a stress response so that we can cope with things well. But really, there are a lot of ways that we can use our mental filter and our beliefs and step back from those acutely stressful situations so that we're stressing better. We're not having an overactivated stress response that makes us not think clearly and fills our body with stress hormones.
One thing I love about your book is that each day you take a certain task and focus on that. And what's so refreshing to me is we don't have to change our lives. For example, some people are like, well, I'm just going to be stressed because I have this horrible commute and there's traffic, or I have this real high pressure job. I'm an air traffic controller. I'm just going to be stressed. But no, we don't have to change our lives. We have to change our thoughts. And day one, I love this, is you talk about embrace uncertainty. Embrace uncertainty. Talk about that.
Yes. And I love your point, Lori. The book is about the small things we can do without dramatically changing our lives. But we also do need to look outward and really examine our day and see where we are spending a lot of time doing things that we don't necessarily have to do. We think we have to. So it's a real honest look at our day and looking outward. So the embracing uncertainty is interesting. We all have different levels of how much we're comfortable with uncertainty of the future. And we like to think that we control things a lot more than we do. So the future is always uncertain. It's particularly uncertain right now. We call it volatile uncertainty, with dramatic changes, not just not knowing the future, but having dramatic shifts from global events. And that makes some people more anxious than others. So you can ask yourself, how comfortable am I with uncertainty? And some of the questions when we measure this in research are things like, how much can you relax if you don't know what will happen tomorrow, or if you don't know how plans will go later? And so there's this ability that some people have to be okay with not knowing. And all of us can step into that and toward that more, because it turns out when we're intolerant of uncertainty, we're much more vulnerable to anxiety and depression when stressful things happen. And so even during the pandemic, we measured this in a large group of people. We measured how much people were comfortable with uncertainty. And those who could kind of relax into uncertainty and didn't feel like everything had to be planned and they had to know the future, they were much less stressed by the pandemic. They had less PTSD symptoms and even less climate distress. So how do we embrace uncertainty? You know, it's our mind wants predictability, but what we can remind ourselves is that right now is the most and only predictable moment. So now is the time to actually slow down and take some slower breaths and recognize that we don't have to be worrying. You know, ask ourselves, what am I expecting right now? What am I holding on to? What am I worrying about? And so just that check-in can actually relieve us of some of the momentary stress, so we can relax now and then have this new attitude about the future of not knowing mind, of we don't really control the future. And so we can spend less time thinking of ruminating and worrying and projecting into the future. So even just leaning back puts us into a state of more of the present. Whereas so I think this kind of receptive stance of letting experiences come to us rather than really living in the future and projecting forward and trying to plan. We problem solve a lot in our head, but it's really just not productive problem solving, just trying to control the uncertain future that we never really can control.
This is so profound and speaks to each one of us. And I know for me, I have seen people who, for example, you know, if their boss says to them, hey, I need to see you at the end of the day, they don't stress out about it. They're relaxed. Or if the doctor says, you know, hey, regarding that test that you took, you know, I need to talk to you about the results. We'll do it on Monday. So, you know, they have all weekend to worry about these test results. And some people do worry, and other people are like, you know, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. And it's just really a wake-up call to be embrace uncertainty. And I love the tips that you have in your book. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the 6 other tips that you offer in your book. The next one is how to let go of what you can't control. Wow, that's going to be a great one. So stick around. We'll be right back with Dr. Elissa Epel. The book is called The Stress Prescription: 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're talking about ways to reduce stress in our lives. Boy, do we need this. My guest is Dr. Elissa Epel, author of the book, The Stress Prescription: 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. And Dr. Epel, before the break, we were talking about this next strategy, which is letting go of things you can't control. And those of us who are familiar with 12-step programs know that this is kind of the serenity prayer, too, where you, God God, give me the serenity to change the things I can, to accept the things that I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. So talk about how we let go of things we can't control.
That prayer has so much wisdom, and that's why it sticks around. And I actually put that in the back of my book. That's what we need to do, looking at the different situations in our lives, is really trying to discern with wisdom and humility what we really don't have control over. And there are situations like caregiving, or a family member being ill or having addiction. There are global events, there are local events. All of these we care about. We care so much. And so our mind whirs, taking up a lot of mental real estate trying to solve these. And so one thing that we can do is radical acceptance, is when we realize that this is one of those situations that we have so little control over, is really reminding ourselves, we just need to hear it from ourselves. This is reality as it is right now. Things may change, but right now it happened, or it is what it is. And those statements actually help us. This is a way of just realizing that there are things that we don't need to carry around. We can kind of put down the luggage of the burden of caring for a while. The issues will come back, and we can remind ourselves again. So acceptance is a really important strategy. And the other piece of kind of looking at our day and looking at our life situations is circling what we can control. And that's where we can think about constructive problem solving and how we can stress better about certain things, how we can cope better. Because of course, still it's about our response to the different stressors in our lives.
Absolutely. This is such a big life changer. I know, for me, stressing about how other people think, what they think, that is a complete waste of time. But when we, like you say, bring it back to what can we control about ourselves, that gives us a lot of more sense of peace when we start seeing changes in ourselves because of things that we can control. So again, fantastic, wonderful. It's not easy, but it's definitely worth doing. The third strategy you say is find excitement in challenges. What does that mean?
So this is one, when we're approaching a stressful situation, a hot situation, something we know will be challenging, we can actually say things to ourselves that turn our mind and body's response to more of a positive stress response. We call it moving from threat, where we feel like we're going to fail, too much is at stake, we're having big alarms go off, to more of a challenge state, where we're actually realizing, okay, I'm going to do there's lots of statements that people can say, and it just comes down to how can you view this situation, emphasizing your resources and what you can do, and how that can overcome the demand. So, we think of this as researchers, we think of the balance between resources and demand. And when the resources are high, we actually have a much healthier stress response. We recover more quickly. So, for example, letting yourself remember when you've coped successfully in the past, also taking perspective, remembering this situation, asking yourself, is this situation going to affect me in a year? So there are different ways to frame the situation so that you have more of an energized stress response. Now, when we get stressed, often we're like, this feels terrible. I am stressed about stress. I can't, I won't be able to think. I can feel my heartbeat. And some of us are really sensitive to the physical stress response, and then we stress about stress. So one thing we can do is remind ourselves our stress response is energizing. It's good for us, and it's going to help me cope better, and bring it on. So that kind of bring it on mentality helps us have a nice peak adrenaline and then a quick recovery.
What helps me is to get excited about challenges is I think about in my life when I've always called my mom when something challenging is happening, and she will always give me this pep talk. She's like, you've got this, you've done this before, you're strong, you're resilient, they're going to love you. And now that I don't have her to call and give me that pep talk, I do it to myself. I hear her voice in my head saying, you got this, you're going to be fine. And so instead of being afraid of a challenge, be like, yeah, I'm going to crush this.
I love it. Lori, it's such a good example. So it really helped you when she would say those things.
Yeah, and so we can say these things to ourselves, just this positive self-talk. Like, before a challenge, visualize a success and believe that you'll be a success.
Yes, exactly. It's amazing how what we say to ourselves, our body responds so quickly. And so it really matters. And so we can do that for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we can, you text someone, you got this, just be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of supportive statements actually really work. And one of the biggest lessons about stress is social support, just how much we care about being socially connected. And that is one of the ways that we cope with the big stressors, especially is really through relationships, supportive relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can do that for each other.
Yeah. Great advice. We're going to take another break and be right back with Dr. Elissa Epel, author of The Stress Prescription, 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We are continuing our discussion with Dr. Elissa Epel, author of the book, The Stress Prescription, 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. Boy, isn't that something we always want? So you were talking about the different strategies, and the next one is immerse yourself in nature. Now, this is something that we can all do, even if we live in the city, if we live in an urban environment, right?
Yes. And so the ones we talked about were coping with acute stress in the moment, how we can prepare, what we can say to ourselves, how we can view how life works, giving up some control. These next strategies are all about releasing stress that we've stored in our body. So the nature effect really has beautiful research showing that when we can immerse ourselves in nature, forest bathing, it has been called, walking in the forest, but really paying attention to what we see and feel, hugging trees, touching leaves, all of this immersion in nature reduces blood pressure, cortisol, anxiety. And we can also do that at home. We can create a corner of a house or a room where we purposefully use that to say, okay, this is my place to de-stress, and fill it with, beautiful cues, prayers, pictures, things that send our body the signals of, all right, it's not the phone and the screen, but it's actually time for me to just actually feel my body, breathe, meditate, do yoga, etc. And so we call that deep rest when we're doing something consciously to relax. This is all sorts of mind-body practices, and I believe, prayer can do this too, that we are in a receptive state and we feel safe, and we can actually really allow our body to rejuvenate during those times when we're consciously doing something meditative.
And then you also have one other strategy you call it create bliss bookends. What does that mean? One
of the things that we've learned about mental health and health is that emotional well-being, joy, positive emotion, purpose in life, these are really important for our to reduce stress. And so we can create immediate positive emotion by thinking of something we're grateful for, or by looking forward to something or someone, by sending a text showing what we're grateful for, telling someone why we're grateful. These are powerful, we call them joy practices, that have been shown by research to have positive effects even on reducing inflammation in the body. So kind acts to strangers in one study had beautiful effects on gene expression for inflammation. So this is something we don't usually think of, but to reduce stress, wake up and ask yourself what you're looking forward to, what you feel grateful for, or you can do that before bed. So these bookends of the day are important to set our trajectory for the day, and as well as to help promote more peaceful sleep.
And then the last one is metabolize body stress. What does that mean?
Right. We can have short bouts of stress, like aerobic exercise or hot sauna or cold shower. Those actually work through the body to also relieve anxiety and reduce stress in the body. And the very big tip in the book is really realizing that if we can really see how precious life is and how short life is, if we can develop spiritual urgency, not wait till we get sick and then we feel spiritual urgency, but actually realize now the miracle of life, the fragility of life, we can live our days with more purpose. We can ask ourselves, how do we want to spend our precious time on earth? And that feeling of purpose and of not feeling like you have all the time in the world, but you want to align your time use now to your values and to what you care most about. That is one of the most beautiful ways to reduce stress, to live well, to live with purpose.
Wow, that's so beautiful the way you put that. And to hear you describe that so accurately, it makes me wonder, and why do we ever wake up grumpy because of something so, minuscule as, for example, traffic or something that somebody said to us that was insulting? I mean, life is so precious and it is so short. It's very well said. And when we remember those things, it helps us to have more joy and ease, as your book says. Okay, we're going to take one final break and be right back with Dr. Elissa Epel, author of the book, The Stress Prescription: 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. Stay tuned. We're back with Dr. Elissa Epel, author of the book, The Stress Prescription: 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. Doctor, I wish we had more time to drill down on all of these subjects. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Tell folks where, number one, they can get the book and where they can find out more about you.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Well, the book is out as of the last week in December, and I really hope it's helpful. It has a lot of strategies, and you reviewed 7 of them. And I think there's the question of like, what works for who? So it's really just about finding one and trying it on and really trying to make it a habit. And that can make a big difference. It's these small changes that can have big effects. So my website has resources that I keep updating that are further reading, meditation retreats, research papers. So my website is elissaepel.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much once again, Dr. Epel, for your fantastic research for the book and for joining us today. It was great to see you.
Thank you so much, Lori.
And thanks to you for joining us for this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson, and we'll see you again next week. Bye now.